And this is Mr. McMurray. We'll be talking about, well, not your paper heart. Hopefully your heart's not made out of paper, but the heart that's on your paper, which looks like this thing down here that we're going to be working on. All right, so that's good. Let's get that paper out and we will get started. All right, let me backtrack here a second. And let's try this again. All right, so here we are. So you have your heart, like I said, on this side is your left side over here, and right, kind of opposite of the way it is on your paper heart. Okay, so let's start talking about it. The first ones we're going to talk about is just the path of it through the heart, and then we'll go back and talk about some of the things that haven't been labeled yet and what their names are, and I'll talk more about them later. But on the test, I will ask you, say I start on a certain part of your heart, say the left ventricle, and then you will need to trace the path of the blood through the heart. And so that's what we're going to do first here. All right. So first of all, the blood goes to your heart, to your body, and it has given it food and picked up waste products and stuff like that, and it's coming back. If it's from your head and your neck and everything like that, it's going to be coming from the superior vena cava. Superior means on the top, so it's the vein, big vein coming from the top. Your head, your shoulders, your arms, all that blood is going to come through here. Okay. On the other end, you have the inferior vena cava, okay, which inferior means the bottom half. So from the your guts and your legs and all that stuff, your trunk basically, all that's going to be coming up here, and it will come in here. The superior vena cava is going to come in here, and they're going to empty into this chamber here, which is labeled as the right atrium. Okay, if there's more than one, we talk about the atria, that's both of them, but just one of them is going to be the right atrium. All right, so notice it's very thin walled. It's not going to have to pump very hard. All you guys do is push the blood, and it's going to go down here to the bottom, and gravity's most of the time, if you're standing up, is going to help you do that, or sitting up. So it really doesn't need to be a very strong pumping. It's mostly a big collection chamber that collects all that blood here. All right, now it's going to go through this valve here, or this opening between it, and it's called the right AV valve. AV stands short for atrioventricular. Atrio means having to do with the atrium, which is up here, and it connects it to the ventricle down here, so that's why it's called the atrioventricular valve. And since that's such a big mouthful, that's why we usually just call it the AV valve. All right, now it's also known as the tricuspid because there are actually three flaps. You just see one here, but there's actually three flaps that open and close this. And so tri means three, cuspid is flap or tooth, and so it's got these three tooth or three flap valve that opens it. So it's called the tricuspid valve. Once it goes through there, it's going to go down into the right ventricle. Notice the right ventricle has more muscular walls because it is going to have to pump the blood. The ventricles are the pumping chambers, and the right ventricle is going to have to pump it, but they're not very big because they only have to pump it to the lungs, which are over here to the left and over here to the right. So they're not really going to have to pump it very far. So they're not real thick. Okay? Now it's going to pump it. It's going to have to go through this valve up here. This valve, you notice, is kind of like a half circle, or a half moon if you prefer. And so this is called the semilunar valve. Semi, half, lunar. Looks like a little half moon, I guess, to the people who looked at it first, and they said it looks like a semilunar valve. Now, since it's going to the lungs, pulmonary just means having to do with the lungs. So pulmonary semilunar valve is the valve that's leading to the lungs. Now, you'll notice that when it comes out of that, it's going to go up through one opening here, but then it's going to split, and one side's going to go to this lung, the other one has to go underneath the aorta behind the superior vena cava and go out to the right lung. It's very congested in here, so they have to kind of weave around each other sometimes to do that. All right, and so they're going to split. Technically, this part here is called the pulmonary trunk, and then it's going to split, and this is going to go to the left pulmonary artery, and then that one's going to go to the right pulmonary artery over here. And so those two things are going to happen. Okay, that's going to take it to the two lungs. In the lungs, it will pick up oxygen. So we're going to say the lungs picks up oxygen. Now the blood is red, so that's why we show red. That just means that it has oxygen. It's going to be coming back to the heart, so instead of arteries, they're going to be in veins, and since they're coming from the lung, they're going to be called pulmonary. So left pulmonary vein is bringing blood back from the left lung to the heart. Right pulmonary vein is bringing it back to the heart also. Now the right pulmonary has to go behind all this stuff and come in the back door kind of here in the shadow there, and the left pulmonary veins come in right there. So they go into the left atrium, the top chamber again. It's an atrium, and once again very thin walls because it's not a very doesn't have to do a whole lot of pumping, mostly just has to pump it down to the bottom part. Okay, it's going to go through a valve, but this time the valve, of course, is on the left side, so it's going to be the left AV valve, atrioventricular, connects the atrium to the ventricle down here, so that's why it's AV valve. But this time it also has 2 teeth and 2 flaps instead of 3, so it's called a bicuspid valve. Now it's also called the mitral valve, M-I-T-R-A-L, mitral. So if you hear someone getting a mitral valve replaced, that's the same valve as the left AV and the bicuspid. So for some reason it gets 3 names as if it didn't have enough already, but there you go. Alright, once it goes to that valve, it's going to go down to this bottom part, which is going to be the left ventricle. Notice the left ventricle has a very thick wall because it is a pumping chamber, just like the right ventricle. But unlike the right ventricle, it's going to have to pump the blood all the way out to the body, to your fingertips, to your toes, and then it has to come all the way back on that same pump for the most part. So it's going to be a lot stronger. It's going to pump it a lot harder. Okay, when it leaves the ventricle, it goes through these valves right here. You'll notice that they're kind of rounded again, kind of like these were here. So they're going to be called semilunar valves. But this time, these valves are going to be called the aortic semilunar because they're going to the aorta and not the pulmonary artery. But very much the same shape, a little cup shape, a little round circle, half circle shape. So it's going to be your aortic semilunar valve. Then from there it's going to go through the aorta, which is the main artery leaving your body. So this part right here, just like Mickey D's has arches, well this one has a single arch, so it can be called the aorta or the aortic arch. Okay, technically part down here at the bottom would be the aorta, but as it turns like that, it's going to be the aortic arch. And just for the record, it would go down behind the heart. These 3 blood vessels, arteries, would send blood to your neck and to your arms on right and left sides and stuff like that. But then it would go down behind your heart, and down here at the bottom, this would be the dorsal aortic. It's going down the back side now, and that goes down the backbone and carries blood to your gut and your legs and all the other stuff down south. All right, so it doesn't have a line through it, but if I were you might want to label this one down here at the bottom. That is the aorta. Then it would go to the body, then it would come back to the vena cavas, and it would go back through the body again. Okay, and so that's basically the cycle that it would go through. Now there are a few other things. These are called the chordae tendineae, tendons. You notice that, kind of like we know what tendons are, a little connective tissue. Chordae means cord. Okay, so these are basically, or can also mean heart. Chordate means heart shaped. So these are literally your heartstrings, and you'll have some over here too. And these are what help, they're part of the flaps and have to do with them opening and closing. Okay, actually what they do is they keep them from going too far the other direction. When this part is pumping and pushing the blood, these anchor these things so they don't let all the blood go right back up this direction. We'll talk more about that later. But those are basically the heartstrings. Someone says, oh, I felt the heartstrings flutter, then that's what they're talking about. All right, fossa ovale. Oval just has to do with the shape. There's a little oval shape here. Fossa has to do with a little dip or a little hole. So you can see the little depression here. This used to be a connection where blood could go from this side directly over here to the left side and bypass going to the lungs. All right, so once again, when you're a baby, you don't need the blood to go to the lungs because it already has oxygen from the mom's blood, so it would just go straight across. In most people, this closes up. Sometimes it just stays open just a little bit. If it does, that's not a big deal. Although sometimes later in life, so say, hey, you got a little heart murmur where blood is squishing across there still. But as long as it closes up most of the way or almost all the way, that's not a big deal. Okay, so that is the fossa ovale. All right, and let's see, do we have anything else? We have a couple more things. All right, this outside layer of the heart, kind of like the epidermis, is going to be the epicardium. Okay, it's on the outside layer. All right, just like the epidermis is on the top side layer. All right, the main layer of the heart, the muscle part, is called the myocardium. Myo means muscle. not Mayo, that's different. But myocardium is going to be the heart muscle. So it's the cardium has with heart. Myo means muscle, so it's going to be the heart muscle. All right, and this part right here is the interventricular septum. It's just a septum means wall. S-E-P-T-U-M, septum. It's between the ventricles, so it's called the interventricular septum. You'd also have a septum between the atria up here, but you can't see it because of all the blood vessels. All right, so that is all the labeling for the heart and just a little breakthrough of the heart issues. Now, let me make a quick run through of the order that things run through the heart. We talked about that as we were labeling it, but just so you have an idea of that, let me write that and type that down for you. All right, so basically this is it written out. I'll leave it up there and you can pause it, whatever, to write this all down. It looks a little intimidating at first, but it's not too bad. It comes back from the body in the vena cavas, your inferior and superior. Comes on the right side in the atrium, the top part, goes through the AV valve and down to the right ventricle. That's on the right side. Then it leaves going to get blood, so it goes toward the lungs, pulmonary semilunar valve, and then it goes to the right and left pulmonary arteries to get to the lungs. Then it comes back from the lungs and the right and left pulmonary veins. Veins come back to the heart, whereas arteries are leaving the heart. It goes in the left atrium, through the left AV valve into the left ventricle. Then it goes out to the aortic semilunar valve, because now it's going away from the body through the aorta, so the aorta, then it goes to the body, and then it would come back through this inferior and superior vena cavas into the right atrium and so forth and so on. Just keep repeating constantly, hundreds and hundreds of times every day. All right, and by the time you've lived this long, literally billions of times your heart has beat, which is pretty incredible considering that it doesn't have to be replaced or repaired very often, especially not yet at your age. All right, so anyhow, the good news is for the quiz, it will not have all the valves on there, the right AV valve, left AV valve, and all that stuff. They will be on the test, but both times you will have a word bank, so that won't be too bad. And that pretty well concludes it for the heart, first part of the heart notes. All right, I'll see you back when we get to the cardiovascular notes.